All right, the Buckeyes back. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, Ohio State, as we talk Buckeyes here live every Wednesday at 1:30 Central, 1:30 Eastern time. I'm still stuck in the Oklahoma show that I just got out of. 1:30 Eastern time here, Buckeyes Live. Kevin Noon, Buckeyes Scoop joining us as always, and Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Hey, guys, how we doing?
Doing good.
Right.
We're missing Tony this week.
I wouldn't say missing.
We are technically missing. He is absent from the show.
He's your buddy.
Kevin confirmed that he's not missing Tony. But, well, Kevin, that just means that you and Steve need to be like double up on the jabs, the one-liners. All right?
Do what
Very
I can.
good.
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. Fill in for Gerd. All right, everybody bring your comments, your questions, debate topics there in the live chat. The Buckeyes, of course, at 4-1, back in the Big Ten, and taking on Maryland this week at the Horseshoe as a 20.5-point favorite the last I checked. All right, Steve, let's start with you. What did this Rutgers win mean? Because certainly I think much of Buckeye Nation was relieved and felt good about, okay, we saw what Rutgers did against Michigan, where if they could have just pulled together one explosive play, one dynamic play to turn the tide, outplayed Michigan by a considerable margin in the second half of that game, turn around at home, and Ohio State just lowers the hammer, and it's not even a contest.
Yeah, I think you have to be emboldened by the fact that Ohio State's defense against a Big Ten opponent really slammed the door on Rutgers and played outstanding, had a pick six in the first 3 minutes of the game by Denzel Burke, held Rutgers to only 13 points total for the game, less than 300 yards total offense. And so I think there were a lot of good positives that came out of this. And C.J. Stroud came back after a week away because of the shoulder injury. And he was sharp. I think he was 17 of 23 for 330 yards and 5 touchdowns and spread the ball around to a lot of different people. The tight ends got a number of passes. Chris Olave, after a couple down games, played really big for the Buckeyes. So I think that there was so much that came out of that you had to be happy about. Again, take it with a grain of salt. It was against Rutgers, and that's a team, yes, they were 3-1 to start the season. They're going to struggle to probably get the 6 wins and make a bowl game. But again, baby steps, I think, for this Ohio State defense, this Ohio State team starting to come together. And you get the feeling that this looks and feels a lot like Ohio State is supposed to look and feel, how they've played the last 10 years, really dominating lesser opponents in the Big Ten. And now they get another test this week with Maryland, 4-1 coming in, although that one really said a lot last week, losing at home to Iowa, 51-14.
Yeah, we're following up. It's only Akron with it's only Rutgers, and if Ohio State's able to cover the 21-point spread, are we going to be saying it's only Maryland after that as we go into the open week and wash, rinse, repeat? But I think there was a lot of good things that you take out of the Rutgers game. We saw Ohio State get off to a fast start, something that it had not done in any of its previous games. We're not talking about C.J. Stroud throwing high or short hopping guys. I mean, his throws were on the money. Of the couple few incompletions he had, most of them were of the drop variety. We got a chance to see Trevion Henderson do Trevion Henderson type of things, but we're still not really looking at another game where he's had 10+ carries. And then on the defensive side of the ball, 3 interceptions. That's certainly going to bode well against a quarterback this week who threw 5 of them into his little brother, which is just easier to say than pronounce his name. I can say Taliyah Naoteote, and I can say JT Tuimoloau. So I'm just going to kind of ride with those two. But I think that there are plenty of positives that can be taken out of it, but they certainly did not play a perfect game. But you're not supposed to be playing perfect football the first weekend of October. You're supposed to be working up, hitting that crescendo as you get to the game at the end of November, and then see where things take you through the postseason.
Because of what we do here, taking a lot of comments and questions, call-in shows throughout the week, there's this constant, especially at about this point of the season, this constant, prove how good you are. Well, you beat this team. Well, how good are they? Because they really haven't beaten anyone. You kind of chase your tail across the country because it seems as though nobody's really beaten anybody that's any good. Even if you've beaten somebody like Notre Dame or Wisconsin, let's say, well, they're no good because who have they beaten? And you play this endless game of who beat who, and did it really mean anything? I think we've seen enough out of Rutgers to know who they are. They're not a excessively talented team. They're not going to contend for a Big Ten Eastern Division championship. They're not dynamic in any such way, offensively especially. But are they a joke anymore? No, they're not. They're a solid team. They're a decent team that could compete for a bowl game. They got to go 3-6 in the Big Ten. It's possible. They just came off a game again in which they held it together in the first half against Michigan, stayed within striking distance. Then they completely dominated the line of scrimmage against Michigan for a full half. It wasn't even close, but just didn't have enough offense to do anything to overcome the score deficit. Actually had the ball within 7 points inside the Michigan 10 in the final 10 minutes, and then bogged down deep in the red zone and missed a field goal. So this is a team that was able to do that on the road and then turn around and they get bludgeoned by the Buckeyes in Piscataway. And so it says something. It's one game, and Ohio State certainly hasn't arrived, but they cleaned up quite a bit this past week. To both of your points, 1 week ago, people were thinking Iowa limited on offense. Maryland, they've got this passing game that's explosive with two studs on the outside and Raheem Jarrett and Dante Demas. Taliyah Tagovailoa is throwing the ball, the deep ball, as well as anybody in the conference. They've got a shot to pull off the upset at home. They were only a 3 or 4 point underdog, and they got their doors blown off. So now the Terps step in, Kevin, against the Buckeyes. What are you looking at here?
Well, I'm looking at a team that's without Dante Demas because he's hurt for the season. So now Raheem Jarrett's going to have to carry the mail that much more. They have some other younger receivers, but I see a team that I don't think that can really run the ball with any consistency. We hear all this about Tagovailoa being this dual threat quarterback. He has less than 15 rushing yards on the season, but guys seem to dig down and play their best game against Ohio State in that type of position. But I think it's a team that's certainly going to have to get it done via the pass. And I'm looking for my spreadsheet that I have here. I was working on tail of the tape. Maryland has, over the course of the 6-game series is averaging going 10 of 23, completing 41% of its passes and scoring 133 or having 133 yards of offense via the pass, and has a grand total of 4 touchdowns over the 6 years, 8 interceptions. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a different outcome when it comes to how Maryland looks as a throwing team here, but the loss of Demas is going to be huge, as he was really, their main weapon in terms of yardage and receptions, while Jarrett had 4 touchdowns to Demas's 3. Now Ohio State can really key in on Jarrett.
Yes, I agree with what Kevin is saying. I watched a couple of their games this morning. I think their front 7 on defense is pretty good. They are 4th in the country in sacks right now, 18 sacks through whatever it would be, 5 games. So they've gotten some things done defensively, maybe a little better defensively than what we've seen out of Maryland in the past. Their secondary is okay, I think. I don't know that it's great. I don't know that they give up a lot of yards passing either. The thing with Iowa last week, they had 51 points, but they got, I think, 4 of their scores after Maryland turnovers on very short fields. And by short, I mean like 26 yards, 10 yards, 27 yards, and 40 yards, I think, were 4 of the scores that came right after interceptions or fumbles, which obviously it's a team game, and that's part of the game. If your defense can force a turnover and give your offense a short field, it makes it that much easier. But I don't know that that's a ringing indictment of the Maryland defense to be sent out there on 1st and goal from the 10-yard line and say, go get them, guys, because that's a hard job for anybody to stop a team, particularly a team as big and rugged as Iowa is. So, I'm interested. I want to see again what Maryland has to give in this game. Coming on the road might be tough. Be over 100,000 people, I presume, at Ohio Stadium. Homecoming game, which means less and less, it seems, every year. But at any rate, throw in some of the festivities with that. But I just think about it and say, we've seen over the years Ohio State is 6-0 against Maryland. The average margin of victory is 36 points. And, Ohio State was favored by 14 last week over Rutgers and beat them by 39.
Right back.
There you go. So I think that you're looking at a situation where Ohio State is trying to get that trajectory going up with some tougher challenges coming up. After the off week, they are at Indiana, back home with Penn State, and at Nebraska, who is starting to finally, play some decent football as well. So some much tougher challenges coming down the line. I think at Indiana, although Penix won't play potentially in 2 weeks, hard to say whether his shoulder will allow it or not. At Indiana could be as tough a challenge as this Maryland game. So the Buckeyes will want to come home and take care of business, jump on Maryland early, just as they did against Rutgers this past week, get off to a fast start. Ohio State scored in the first half. They had the defensive touchdown, plus they had 5 offensive touchdowns and a field goal in their first 6 possessions. So that was huge, obviously, for the Buckeyes to get off to that kind of a start.
Yakov, appreciate you being here. Yakov22, always in the chat talking Buckeyes football. And appreciate the super chat contribution. Yakov actually delivering here where I was going to go next. And it was the running back situation, because this is a topic of conversation that we delved into repeatedly on a regular basis during the offseason, was how is this running back position going to start out and then evolve throughout the season in regards to snaps and carry distribution. And we've seen it take off and change and evolve in the last several weeks, Steve. So your thoughts about the comment with Yakov talking about Marcus Crowley, who contributed nicely this past season, or this past week, and then just kind of the way the running back situation is evolving.
Well, I like Marcus Crowley as much as the next guy. I think Mayan Williams early in the season showed some amazing things, but obviously something's got him down right now because he hasn't been there to contribute the last couple of games. So until we figure out what's going on with him, maybe Coach Dave will shed some light tomorrow when we get a chance to talk to him about what is going on with Mayan Williams, and we'll get maybe a better read of what's going on with him. But I think Mayan Williams would be number 2. Master Teague 2A, and Marcus Crowley 2B. I mean, it's on any given week, I think they could all help the bottom line. So, I think that it's too soon to make any sudden declaration of anything based on one swing pass that he caught and a couple runs against a downtrodden and beaten Rutgers. I mean, he didn't go into the game till it was like 24-0. So, I like Marcus Crowley. I'm glad he's healthy, and he's just another guy to throw on the pile. And another reason why people are like, well, Travion Henderson should be in the Heisman race. We need Travion Henderson to get 20 carries a game so he could win the Heisman as a freshman. And I'm like, no, you don't. You've already lost one game this year. If he goes down again, you run the risk of losing another game at some point. He's a guy that makes your team special. And you want him to be out there playing against Penn State and Michigan State and Iowa. And then, if you make the playoff, whoever that might be. So, playoffs. But at any rate, I just think that you use all those guys to your full benefit and not to the exclusion of any other guy. At this point, you keep them all involved. You keep them all engaged. And, you see with Master Teague, he ran hard last week because he's been kept involved and kept engaged, and he's done it as a guy should. He's been passed over, yes, but he's not letting him get it down. When he gets his opportunities, making the most of them.
Yeah, I think we all love lists so much. Who's number 2? Who's number 3? I don't think it really matters. I think that when Trevion Henderson isn't out there, it depends on what the situation is. Do you need to sit there, and are you bringing somebody in and you need a tough couple of yards, or is it somebody that you need that's a better pass catcher? I think that depending upon the situation, and obviously depending on who's available, because we have seen guys on that unavailable list throughout the season, I think that's going to dictate things more than just saying, well, this guy's the number 2. I mean, it doesn't matter who the number 2 is. I mean, just make sure that you have your guys and you have them in good situations that they're ready to go. As Steve said, we saw Marcus Crowley make some big plays, but earlier in the year, we saw Mayan Williams make some big plays. We saw Steel Chambers we saw Master Teague look really good today, or this week. So because of that, I don't think that Tony Alford and Ryan Day are having this discussion of trying to put guys into certain boxes and say that they're this or they're that. I think that you just have a nice complement of weapons out there, and you kind of run them in as needed.
Absolutely. Let's please not sacrifice a Big Ten championship for raising Trevion Henderson's Heisman candidacy by like a 4% possibility. I just don't think that that's a good trade-off to make. Cheryl's got a good question here, kind of staying in line with where I was going to head on the defensive improvement this past week. So she's asking whether Barnes is calling the right defensive plays and switching it up, zone, man-to-man, using the right players. So what have you guys seen? Well, Steve, we'll start with you in regards to, it's only been one game, but seeing the defensive adjustments. Well, I guess it's been 2 games, but one meaningful opponent, I guess, in seeing the defensive adjustments, whether it be personnel groupings, scheme, etc.
Yeah, I think that they've done it 3 games because he took over for Tulsa. The switch was made after the Oregon disaster, and Tulsa had 500 yards total offense against them, and that didn't go so well. But Akron and Rutgers, probably not a good representative sample, because Akron was outmanned and Rutgers was outmanned, so to speak. So Rutgers, I think, has got an offense that's good enough to score 21, 24 points against most Big Ten teams, but it's kind of a station-to-station offense, with Noah Vedral at the quarterback, no deep threat. Melton has been kind of banged up now, so that takes away one of their playmakers. And so, I think this will be more of a test and a challenge, although not having Demas really hurts. But Tagovailoa and his receivers, I think, are going to test Ohio State, and Ohio State will want to get a better pass rush going because Maryland likes to hit those explosive big plays and throw the ball downfield with Tagovailoa. So to my way of thinking, I think Barnes is doing a decent enough job. I think what we're seeing is some young guys like Ronnie Hickman, Lathan Ransom, Cameron Martinez, Denzel Burke in the secondary are starting to really come on. Cody Simon is starting to kind of feel his way around to what he needs to do. Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle, a true freshman, is starting to push his way through that glass ceiling to more playing time as a true freshman. And now they need 1 through 11 on that side of the ball to do their job. And that includes Zach Harrison at defensive end. If Tyreek Smith ever comes back, he's at the other end spot. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, looks like Tarzan, needs to play like Tarzan. That's where things are at right now. They're at a critical juncture here where they can put it together and by the end of the season play like one of the Big Ten's best defenses, or just make enough plays to get by. And, I don't think they're going back to how bad they were against Oregon or Minnesota. I think those days are done, but this is a progress. They haven't gone all the way from an F to an A already. Now they're up to about a B minus, or a B, and they need to keep working to get to closer to an A minus. So I'm not even calling it a B plus yet. So I think that they've still got a long ways to go. And they got to prove it against a good offense. That's the problem, is that going against Akron and Rutgers doesn't really mean much in my book You need to show it against a team that's capable, that has beaten other teams, that has put up big yards and made big plays against other teams. Show me you can do it against that team, and then I'll start to believe in you a little bit. We won't know whether they have fully arrived probably till they play Penn State. If they hold Penn State in check and that doesn't end up a 42-41 game, then maybe we'll know. But, I do like the trajectory of a lot of the young players that are starting to trigger and make plays. I mentioned some of them earlier. And as long as those guys continue to make plays, it's great. One other thing that's huge that I guess this is a school record. They've had a pick-6 interception in 3 consecutive games, and that was Martinez against Tulsa, Hickman against Akron, and Didsell Burke this past week against Rutgers. That's never been done as far as the research shows in Ohio State history. And they're going for 4 in a row against a interception-prone, all of a sudden, Taliyah Tagovailoa. So got to like their odds of having a pick. You got to have a pick to score on a pick, and got to figure they're going to have at least, I would say the over-under on picks this week is 1.5, I would think. I think he's going to throw at least 2, maybe. Maybe put the over-under at 2 and just kind of live with that. But I don't know. But, Kevin, what do you think? I think they've made great progress. It's gone from F to C+, B-, but there's still a long ways to go.
Yeah, I'll jump on the interception thing first, and then I'll get to the other side. And I think Maryland's inability to run the ball is going to force them to throw the ball a lot. And I would have set the over-under at 1.5, and I think that the chances of 2 are pretty good. That's where I would put my money. As for pick 6, I don't know, but it sure would be something to have that. That would give us something else to write about in this game going into the open week. But you're right. It isn't a case of where you can just say, well, they've gone from completely screwed up F whatever to A. I mean, they've gone against some teams since Oregon that have had their flaws, have had their fleas, what have you. But I think that Matt Barnes has gone in and they're not running as much cover 1, cover 3. We're seeing more, more 2 high safeties. We're seeing, more 2 safeties. We're seeing some different looks out there. And I think, I put a lot of that into some of the things that Matt Barnes is injecting into the defense. But let's remember, Kerry Combs wasn't a single high guy coming in. That's Ryan Day's system. And I think that some of this too is that Ryan Day has had to take some accountability that we can't just sit there and just run this because I don't particularly like going against this defense. I think that we've seen Ohio State have a little bit more diversity in what they do, and it's so easy to simplify, we're just going to dumb down the defense. We're going to make it easier so we can play faster. It's not a matter of that. I think it's a matter of adjusting to what you have the personnel to run, and Ohio State has the personnel to run some things that's not cover 1 and cover 3. And since doing that, we've seen some success, but we're not going to really know a lot until we get to Penn State, as Indiana is kind of on the downtrend. Michael Penix got hurt in the last game. Not really sure where they stand. I mean, that they're going to get up for when they play Ohio State in Bloomington on the 23rd, but we're not really going to be able to see that midterm exam until we get to Penn State.
I draw some parallels between Taliyah and Michael Penix. Bringing up Michael Penix, I think Michael Penix is a bigger, stronger athlete. He's just a monster of an athlete, chiseled guy. Taliyah is a little bit more like his brother in regards to size and stature, but otherwise the obvious is they're both left-handed, but they'll both not be afraid to let it fly. And sometimes it looks beautiful, and sometimes it just is sizzled through a tight window and it looks amazing on a seam route, or going for the post route on the 9 and let it fly. But sometimes it looks awfully ugly. I've seen Michael Penix on drives this season look like the best quarterback in college football, and then 2 throws later, like on consecutive throws, look like he was completely lost, didn't know where he was throwing the ball. And Taliyah maybe not to that extent this season, but he let it fly against Iowa, and that was the wrong team, certainly. And then once, of course, as Brett Favre famously said in his 6 interception playoff game, hey, if you're down by 4 touchdowns, you're not going to come back by being conservative. So you might as well, if you throw 5 or 6 or 7, that's better than leaving something left on the field. So There we got to see it with Taliyah against Iowa. Speaking of which, guys, before we get any other Ohio State questions, and we, of course, remind everyone that the Super Chat's available here at the Voice of College Football. We got Steve here every week. We got Kevin. We get typically Tony Gerdeman, and they give us our time each and every week, not just here, but as you can imagine, with the various communications and everything that goes on, it's more than an hour here that they provide for us each and every week. So show your consideration for the Super Chat. If you want to go more directly to the Voice of College Football, we're on Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. I would just ask that you would mark that as Ohio State. Broadening out to the Big Ten, I think this league is extremely strong. I've seen enough to think that there are probably five teams that are top 15 to 20 in the nation. We get to see Iowa and Penn State, Steve, this week. How do you size up the conference based on what you've seen in the past? And where do you think Ohio State figures in? I made the comment a couple of weeks ago that everybody else was playing the same brand of game, running game defense, and Ohio State was pass happy and not playing defense, that they were the outlier. But if they could pull it all together, they're, of course, still the most talented roster.
Yeah, they're going the Big 12 route right now with all passing game, a little bit of running game, and no defense, it seems. Now, we know they're coming together defensively at least a little bit. And, it's incremental. It's getting better each week, and the guys are getting experience. I think that's the most important thing. All you can base all these conference comparisons on is who did you play in the non-conference and how did you do? Well, Iowa beat Iowa State, which was good. Penn State beat Auburn. That was at home. That was good. Michigan State went down to Miami. Miami has not turned out to be a very good team, but it was a decisive 3-touchdown win on the road for Michigan State. So that was good for them. All of them took, full advantage of their MAC games or their Conference USA or American or whoever they played.
Except Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota didn't, obviously. Michigan, beat a bad Washington team at home. That's fine. In some regards, the teams are ranked where they are kind of by default because there have been more ranked teams that have lost in the first 5 weeks than at any time in the modern era of college football. So, and you look at teams that were predicted really high in the preseason that now have 2 losses. In Wisconsin's case, 3 losses. So there's a lot of them out there. North Carolina, Iowa State, a lot of teams that were picked ahead of Michigan and Michigan State have fallen completely out of the rankings. And now here's Michigan State. Neither of them ranked to start the season on the basis of a 5-0 start. Some good, some real good, some meh, of their body of work. They've by osmosis, they've just kind of, as you fill out your poll each week, you look at who you had in your poll last week. Oh, 7 and 8 lost. So we got to drop them at least down to 14 or 15. And Michigan was 12. Well, we got to move them up to 10. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. And in this case, they've worked their way up. I mean, there's other teams. I mean, you look at Wake Forest. What are they? 5-0. If you switch the names on Wake Forest and Michigan, then it'd be flipped. It's just kind of the way. I mean, Wake Forest is barely ranked probably, and you look at it and you're like, why is that? But it's just the way it is, I guess. But Ohio State's up there because everybody knows how great they've recruited, how great the talent is. People have watched them on offense and know that they're, literally unstoppable. It seems like Rutgers, which came into the game with a national top 15 defense, had nothing. They had no ability to stop Ohio State from scoring almost at will last week in that first half. And then Ohio State called off the dogs after scoring to start the second half, just kind of said, okay, that's enough. And, in a conference game against a team you're going to play every year, you don't necessarily need to, put your high heel in their eyeball. But, I look at 2 years ago, Ohio State played Maryland. The score was 73-14. There was some scuttlebutt that Maryland may have been involved with Mike Loxley, or I don't know if it was him or somebody involved with the Maryland program, in reporting Chase Young getting some extra benefits that cost him. He wasn't able to play in that game because of it. And Ohio State took out some of its, quote, frustrations a little bit on Maryland. So don't get on Ryan Day's bad side. He's certainly not going to let up against Michigan a whole lot, but he did. I think he kind of called off the dogs last week against Rutgers, and that last 20 minutes was kind of a filibuster of let's get out of here. I said to somebody at halftime, it was 45-6. Can we get the OHSAA to rule on a running clock here by consent of both coaches in the second half? But I think you give the Big Ten credit. It is where it is. They're going to start playing each other with Iowa Penn State this week. I presume Iowa's going to win because the game's being played at Iowa City, and they don't lose there very often if they've got a good team. They don't lose very often at home. But, give Penn State a puncher's chance. Clifford is really starting to play great football. I would give Penn State the edge on offense, and Iowa maybe the edge on defense, and, call the rest of it a wash, I guess. I don't know. But it's going to be a heck of a game. I'm hoping we get our game done to where we can, wrap up whatever it is we need to do afterwards and head somewhere to watch the second half. Because with those Fox 4.5-hour games, it works out pretty good to be able to watch the second half a lot of times.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about that Penn State Iowa game and then the Big Ten in general. I think that Penn State goes into that game kind of falling into the same trap that Maryland did. Maryland can't run the ball. Penn State can't run the ball. I mean, Penn State's a better rushing team than Maryland is, but I think that you give Iowa a team that's largely one-dimensional, and Iowa's going to do a good job of punishing you for that. So I like Iowa to win that game, but the conference in general has played very well. The West is still kind of a mess outside of Iowa. Wisconsin is not very good. People are saying Nebraska's on its way up right now. I'm not going to get all that excited about beating Northwestern. We've already kind of determined this is a crappy Northwestern year. But you look at the East, and I think Rutgers has kind of been exposed. I think Maryland's in the process of being exposed. But you end up having your usual four. You have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, and I think it's really going to come down to what these teams are able to do against one another and what that ends up looking like. And I think that you can look at all four of them and find some very obvious flaws, but then you can also find some things that they do extremely well. And I think that that the Big Ten as a conference is right there in terms of being the top conferences. And I think the Big Ten East is far and away, in my opinion, the most competitive division in football this year.
Any college football fan is going to tell you that the SEC is the best conference, and I understand that. It has played the best over recent years, even going back to 15 years, and we know what the recruiting rankings are, and we know what the NFL draft selections say. But if you just, to Kevin's final point, you just take what the performance has been on the field, and to Steve's point, I hate when people try to judge the strength of conferences once they start playing each other. That only tells us if there's division between the teams in the conference, whether it's top heavy or balanced. That's all that tells us. It doesn't tell us how strong the conference is, because every conference plays 500 against itself. So that only tells us the division between the teams within the conference. You can only go by 9 conference games, and there's really nothing to separate the SEC and the Big Ten in regards to the way they've performed outside the conference. I think the numbers are 8-6 for the Big Ten against the Power 5 and Notre Dame, and it's 6-5 for the SEC. And nobody's really beaten anyone that substantial outside of Iowa State. Auburn would be the Big Ten's big wins. And I guess Texas would be the best win for the SEC. Texas, Louisville, there's not a whole lot there. All right. Good stuff. We got a comment in Super Chat contribution we appreciate coming in from Treasure the Truth. No, Treasure the Torah. Treasure the Torah. Appreciate that contribution there. I just want to say I really enjoy your show. It's refreshing. I think Ohio State can really expose Maryland's defense. I've watched film, and they have big weak spots. Much respect to Buckeye Nation. from a recruiting standpoint, I'll start with you, Kevin, that DJ Durkin did a nice job recruiting top 15 to 25 classes at Maryland. I don't think anyone would discount their speed and skill at the skill position spots on offense and in the secondary on defense. They've produced a lot of high-end NFL talent there. It's been in the trenches. The quarterback play has been abysmal. The combination of injuries and just poor recruiting and development there at the quarterback position. They've had arguably the worst quarterback play of any team in the Power Five in the last 10 years. I think Danny O'Brien would be the last decent Maryland quarterback.
Yeah, they beat Texas twice.
They beat Texas twice. They were still able to do that. But Texas was back, but they were still able to get by Texas. So, Kevin, do you see anything, just kind of give your thoughts on this Maryland program? They're in a unique area of the country, great recruiting spot. Nobody seems to necessarily care much, but, they're an intriguing program in many ways.
Yeah, being right there in the DMV area. And for those who don't follow recruiting, that's DC, Maryland, Virginia. But being right there, there's a lot of talent there. And it's a matter of keeping it home. And while DJ Durkin certainly did a good job of keeping some of it home, I think Mike Loxley's an even better recruiter. I think that they do a good job as well, but they're a young team. They aren't necessarily getting the biggest of big names from there, but they're keeping, maybe 1 through 4 are kind of escaping, but they're keeping 5 through 20 home. And because of that, they've got guys. But I was going through and looking at career starts for guys in their 2 deep. A lot of guys with 6, 7 starts. So, I mean, they're doing a lot of turning over of the team. And I think it's a team that could probably be certainly better next year. They need to hit on a couple of key guys in key positions. I like their offensive tackles. I think that they're pretty good. I love Rakeem Jarrett. I thought Rakeem Jarrett was going to end up at Ohio State if Ohio State didn't get Julian Fleming. But obviously Ohio State got Julian Fleming, so Rakeem Jarrett ended up staying home. They need some help at running back. Anthony McFarland is not running through that door. But then again, Ohio State made Anthony McFarland, in my opinion, because I never really saw McFarland have even 75% of the success he did in any other game compared to what he did against Ohio State and Ohio State's inability to figure out what they were doing with him. So I think that they're a team that has a bit of an upward trajectory. I like Loxley as a recruiter. I'm not sold on him as a head coach. I just am not sure that they've been able to put everything together, but I'm saying give him some time. I mean, obviously he was there in the career rehabilitation program under Nick Saban at Alabama. And, as long as he doesn't have to go against Bama, I guess that's going to be fine, but he should certainly put himself in the toughest division in college football. And it's going to be a lot harder for him than some of these other guys to be able to come right back and say, hey, I'm fully rehabilitated after, whatever his stint was down in New Mexico and some of these other stops.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. They have 4 wins, and the Iowa game last week was the first of 5 games against against ranked teams in their final 8 games, and you figure they're going to have a hard time winning any of those. So they need to pluck off between playing, I think it's Minnesota, Indiana, and Rutgers. They've got to pluck off 2 wins somewhere in those 3 games, and 2 of those games might be on the road, Maryland. So they got to pluck off a couple wins somewhere just to get bowl eligible, just as Rutgers now still needs 3 more wins to be bowl eligible, and it's going to be an uphill climb, I think, for them. Anybody like Maryland who has to play Iowa as your crossover opponent, that really sucks to be you, I guess. And obviously Penn State has to play them now. But, at least Penn State's got the team to contend with it. There is a division, I think, there in talent. And again, I mean, it is what it is. I think that kids want to play, even if Maryland may be their best offer, they want that opportunity to play in the Big Ten in big time games against the best of the best. It's the same thing as being playing Kentucky in the SEC. Kentucky's starting to turn the corner a little bit, beat Florida, and now they're number 2 in the East behind Georgia, it seems like. So, and I don't know that it's a permanent proclamation or anything, just in terms of this year's race. It's them and Georgia in the East right now, it looks like. So, I don't know. As Kevin said, they got, just like Rutgers, they've got some built-in advantages with a fertile recruiting ground and just enough star power with a name like Tagovailoa to kind of be relevant on the periphery. But now you got to win some games. You got to beat some teams that you weren't supposed to beat, and that's what raises your profile up and makes your program more of a destination. I mean, Maryland, I looked at it, they haven't beaten a top 10 team since 2009. Syracuse was in the top 10 when they played them back in 2009, I believe, and they beat them. And then they are 0-23, I believe, against ranked Big Ten opponents since joining the Big Ten in 2014. They've only beaten 3 ranked opponents in the time they've been in the Big Ten, and 2 of those were Texas in those back-to-back years. And then there was another stray one, maybe Syracuse a couple of years ago when they were ranked early in the season. I think they went up to Syracuse and beat them. So, all 3 of their ranked wins in the last 7 seasons have been non-conference games. So you're not going to get very far. If you can't beat the ranked teams in your own conference, you're certainly not going to contend. So, they got some levels of football they need to climb to get where they want to be.
So playing off of dependent fanatics comment here about the Big Ten. So right now it's pretty much groupthink, and I'm not saying it's incorrect, that Georgia and Alabama are the 2 best teams in the country. There's nobody close, and they are playing a different sport. And it would be I'm not disagreeing with that. I've made a similar comment through 5 games. And I think the way it's shaping up is that Ohio State is the only team in the country, considering the talent on the roster, not that they're going to pull it together to that degree and raise their level of play that high, but they may be the only team that's capable of doing it to play with those 2. So, Kevin, I'll ask you to give us your thoughts on that narrative, as well as what Dependent Fanatic is saying about possibly the Big Ten getting 2 teams in the playoff.
Well, we have to see how some things shape up out there. I mean, do certain conferences fall off? I mean, right now, if the Alabama-Georgia narrative holds true and Georgia runs through the East and Bama runs through the West and they play each other in Atlanta, and it's, Bama beats Georgia in a close one or Georgia beats Alabama in a close one, you're going to have 2 there. I think the playoff committee is going to be very hesitant to have the full field coming from 2 conferences. Now, if it's just a gigantic chasm between the top 4 and everybody else, then okay. But what happens if Cincinnati wins out? There are so many other things that can happen at this point. Oklahoma hasn't lost yet. I like Texas to beat them, but we'll see. I mean, the last time I put faith in Texas, it was like the last time I put faith in WVU, and I lost in a big way. So I'm very hesitant to sit there and put my money where my mouth is on that. But if the Pac-12 falls apart, if Oregon loses again, because it certainly would help Ohio State's case with Oregon having kind of a game in hand over Ohio State. But if the Pac-12 falls off, Notre Dame has kind of fallen off. The ACC, I mean, I know they're undefeateds there, but Clemson is out of the equation. I don't see Wake Forest being able to hang on. Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument for it, but I just think that if the tie is going to go to not having 4 teams out of 2 conferences, I just can't see that. It's just going to accelerate the death of the 4-team playoff and push us to 8, 12, 16, 412, whatever it might end up being at that point. And I think people are fat and happy and comfortable with where they are, and they don't want to necessarily be having to change things up. So, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think about Cincinnati. Let's look at them. They should have beaten Georgia last year in the bowl game. If Luke Fickell doesn't screw up the timing at the end of the game, I think they threw a ill-conceived, incomplete pass that cost them 40 seconds of clock time. Where they should have run the timeout on Georgia. Then maybe they beat Georgia in that bowl game, and now here we are 9 months later, and Cincinnati looks like they could play with just about anybody in the country. And have they made the same type of improvement Georgia has in the 9 months since then? Well, until you put them on a field, you wouldn't know. But Cincinnati seemed to be a half notch better than Georgia in that bowl game. Georgia just ended up with more points at the end of the game. So I don't think you can discount Cincinnati at all if they win out, particularly because SMU seems to be respectable with a win over TCU. Memphis is respectable with the win over Mississippi State. Houston is just kicking the crap out of everybody that they're playing right now. I don't know what they did in terms of a Power 5 opponent. It seems to me that may be their one loss early in the season. But
Texas Tech.
Yeah. So, their league is not a laughingstock league by any means. They've won their share of games against opponents from, and I think for this misnomer that the difference between the Pac-12 and the American is this wide chasm from 5 to 6, it's not. It really isn't. I think that the American can play football with a lot of teams, a lot of teams in that league. If you put Cincinnati in the Big Ten, where would they be? I think they'd be right there along, maybe not quite with Iowa and Penn State, but they'd be right there. I mean, they're ranked right there. Aren't they 3, 4, 5 this week? So, and then Oklahoma 6, OSU 7. This is my humorous note of the week. I vote in the Super 16 poll, the Football Writers, which I think it exists, one, to get some relevancy out there that there is the Football Writers Association, that they put their poll out at noon on Sundays as a talking point before the coaches poll and the AP poll come out in like an hour or two later. And it just kind of raises the awareness that there is a Football Writers Association of America, which is kind of cool. I think we have some neat things that we do as a group, but I'm selected as a voter. So I'm sitting there, and Kevin knows this process because we've gone through it many times in the hotel room at 1 a.m. as the Pac-12 games are winding down. Oh, you can't put Kansas State over Iowa State. They beat them head-to-head 3 weeks ago. You're sitting there at 1 a.m. and you're debating,
beer in hand.
yeah, what should it be? And we're having these spirited conversations. So I got up probably 8, and I sat there. It's got to be in by 10. And I sat there, and I was like, doggone it. I want to drop Oregon, but I can't drop them below Ohio State. They went to Ohio State and beat them on the road. So I turned mine in with Oregon at 7, Ohio State 8, and turn it in. Don't think much about it. Then I see that poll comes out, the AP poll comes out, and the coaches poll comes out, and all 3 polls have Ohio State ranked ahead of Oregon. And here I am, the Ohio State homer, the guy who's supposed to, put Ohio State over everybody. And I was the one person who observed head-to-head, which just happened. There's only been – it's not like there's been 10 games played, and we got all of these data points. We've got 5 data points for each team, and that one sticks out like a sore thumb that Oregon went to Ohio State, dominated Ohio State, beat Ohio State on the road, and here we are 3 weeks later, and it's like it's chopped liver. It didn't matter. And Ohio State, just because they blew out a middle of the road, maybe 6-6 Rutgers team, and Oregon lost on the road to an unranked Stanford team that, I think Stanford's on their way to having a pretty good season, it looks like to me. So I know that they opened with a terrible loss in Arlington, I think it was, to Kansas State. But since then, they've played lights out football. So any rate, I said, I guess I need to work on being a better homer going forward, and I'll get it right next week. But I won't make that mistake again. Hell, if everybody else is picking Ohio State, I will too.
Well, Steve, I'm not going to get started on the AP poll. My one example of some contradiction is going to be that a couple of weeks ago, in the AP poll, you had Kansas State beat Stanford, as you just mentioned, in a 3-score game. Stanford killed USC, game that was 42-13 in the fourth quarter. They had USC ranked ahead of Kansas State, and Kansas State was 3-0, and USC was 2-1.
How do you do that?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
I try to keep a record. I look at my ballot each week, and I bring it over to the next week, and I write who they're playing out to the side. And then as I get down to the bottom and the teams in the bottom of the 25 have a loss, I will notate back up at the top who, okay, let's say North Carolina is 25 and I had Virginia Tech at 15. I'll go up and write next to Virginia Tech, North Carolina, that I know that they've got a quality top 25, current top 25 win. I'm not thinking so much about, okay, somebody beat Wisconsin. I may subconsciously throw that in there, but now that they're completely out of the 25, I wouldn't give Notre Dame necessarily all that much credit for that. But of the current top 25, if the last 10 or 15 teams have a loss or two, I go back up on my sheet each given week and say, okay, remember when this team beat your number 20 team, this team beat your number 17 team, this team beat your number 8 team, to let you know, there's something beyond just what they did that week.
I also think it's reasonable to consider that there's nothing magical about 25.
Yeah.
It could be 20, it could be 28,
30.
it could be 37, it could be 14. Yeah. It's just a number. So just because you're at 26 or 29 doesn't mean you're a lesser team or there's any difference between 25 and 26 than there is between 18 and 19. It's just another spot.
You get down to the bottom of, let's say, the AP poll, the last 5, and then like the first 10 receiving votes, and you're like, man, this team's only receiving votes and they've got these wins. Why don't people but again, it's the name value of the team a lot of times that keeps, a Power 5 team at the bottom of somebody's ballot. Like Clemson, after they lost 2 games, was still on people's ballot. And I'm like, what in the hell have they done to deserve a top 25 vote?
Nothing.
They had up to that point. Now, finally, they beat Boston College, who was undefeated. That's a quality win, even though Boston College wasn't ranked themselves. But still, that's an accomplishment in some regards that, Clemson finally beat a representative team. I didn't have them anywhere near my top 25. No way.
Boston College beat Boston College. Let's be real here. Boston College beat Boston College.
I didn't see the end of it. I was kind of in a twilight.
Brett screwed Brett.
They screwed up a snap inside the 10-yard line at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Boston College did. They shot themselves in the foot.
Would have been to force overtime, or if they kicked the extra point.
Force overtime, yeah.
No, they would have won the game.
Oh,
it's a 19-13.
I may or may not have had Boston College money line in that game, and I may or may not have been cussing at the TV, sitting at a place somewhere near the Rutgers campus.
Halfley, you bleepity bleep.
I put that one out of my mind as much as I can because it turned what was an okay weekend could have been a much better weekend if I would have bet on it.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, Clemson, in losing 2 games, they lost to Georgia early, but then they lost that NC State game, and they played that ridiculously deplorable game against Georgia Tech where they had to make a goal line stand to preserve a 14-8 game. That did not knock them out of the top 25. Beating Boston College, a 5-0 Boston College team, that knocked them out of the AP poll.
Some people came to their senses, I guess. What really happened was you had some unranked teams that beat ranked teams that moved into the poll.
And that's part of it too.
Deservedly so.
Yes.
You had several. I think I moved in 4 or 5 new teams in my top 25 last week just because you had so many of them that deserved to move up.
Absolutely. I did as well. All right, good stuff. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop. Kevin, what you got on the docket? What can people check out?
Yeah, as usual, on Thursday, I drop my tale of the tape of Maryland. I'll sit there and go through some finer points there, going through the history of the series, which, of course, has little to do with what's going to happen on Saturday, but looking for some historical trends. I go through, break down some of the opponents that Maryland has played this year. Are their numbers for real? Are they inflated due to the fact that they've played lesser talent so far? And be heading to Indianapolis for Big Ten Basketball Media Days, which I know doesn't necessarily resonate as well over here being a football show, but we'll have that coming as well.
Very nice. Steve.
And, yep, bucknuts.com. I posted my game data feature. I got it out of the way because, like Kevin, I'm going to the Big Ten basketball event, so I needed to get some of my stuff from later in the week done earlier in the week so that I could clear the decks for that. But we'll be back here tomorrow after that's over and continue the run up to this Maryland game, and then getting a well-deserved week off next week. At least the team is. I'm sure we'll all be continuing to churn out the content regardless, and gearing up 2 weeks for the trip to Indiana, then back home with the big one against Penn State. So a lot of October is going to be kind of the moving day, so to speak, as they talk about on the PGA Tour, how Saturday is moving day. You got to position yourself for the stretch run. And that's what a lot of these teams are going to be doing here over the next week or 2 or 3 weeks, is trying to position themselves so they can make a run at a championship. I mean, you think about every week is vital for teams like Michigan and Michigan State that don't have that huge margin for error. They need to just keep right on churning. And it's all going to come out in the wash one of these days when they all play each other. But, man, we got some exciting weeks of Big Ten football coming up. And I want to see Penn State, Iowa. That ought to be – I just saw somebody put on our chat that one of them wins 17-10. I didn't catch which team he had winning. But my inclination, again, is Iowa at home. It's just it's such a tough place. The stands at Iowa are right on top of you, and they get 80,000 people, and they are serious about their football at Iowa. So it's going to be a tough environment for Penn State, but they've already obviously won at Wisconsin this year. So, and that was back when Wisconsin was still caring. So, it could be a tough one out there at Iowa City.
And Iowa's not so consistently good and elite all the time that they take these situations for granted. Like they get this about every 5 years where
That's
they
right.
peak. So they're like, wow, this is
our shot.
Yeah, let's show up.
I guess 3 versus 4. It's the first time since like 1962 there's been a matchup of 2 Big Ten teams that didn't involve either Ohio State or Michigan. And that's just kind of crazy in and of itself. So it's been a very long time that 2 other Big Ten teams have played each other in the top 5. So going to be interesting.
I believe this is the first Iowa-related top 5 game since Iowa-Michigan 1-2 in '85.
Yeah, it could be. Now, when they played Michigan, I think they gave Michigan their first loss in 2016. Yeah, I don't know what Iowa was ranked that year, but
they went 8-5 that year.
Yeah, it was the year before when Iowa was undefeated until they lost to Michigan State. Or, geez, the years are running all.
Yeah, they lost to Michigan State in 15 in the Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
L.J. Scott barely reached it across. All right, folks, we hope you appreciate what these guys deliver each and every week. Don't take it for granted. Every week we got Steve, we got Kevin. They deliver for us. They got a zillion other places to be and things to do. So we hope you appreciate that. You can contribute directly, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Just want you to put Ohio State. Please consider doing that here at the Voice of College Football. Okay, guys, enjoy the game. Appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next week.
All right.